Hello, everybody. I'm Alex, CEO and founder of MarsBased. I'll be your host today on Life on Mars, and we'll be discussing with Nikki Parsons and Sara Ronzero about the remote worker solitude, which is a very common occurrence on people who work remotely in typically officeless companies or hard remote companies with therefore very few or non-social interactions at all, right? People working from home 8 hours a day that maybe just socialize with the people they share their flat or home with, and they don't go out very much. So, or just people living on a nomadic lifestyle, or people traveling much and just working from very different kind of environments, but they don't have regular interactions with their colleagues, or maybe they have never experienced or they miss the experience of having the water cooler conversations, having lunch with people at the office, or just going out for beers afterwards, right? When the work is done at 6 p.m. or whatever. We talk at length about the solitude, the kind of mental problems and issues that are derived from it, and we open up quite a lot, the three of us, in this regard, because as this is something that's particular to MarsBased, and a few other companies are doing the right thing as well. We believe that mental health is health after all, so that's why we want to help to open up to other people, maybe lead the way, lead the change in talking about mental health and making it more accessible and less of a social stigma to everybody. And so in this episode, we discuss the effects on the causes of this solitude, how to cope with it, what are like good tips to avoid it, how to talk about it to your partner and family members, how to communicate it to managers, how to manage people when you're undergoing these kind of situations, and how to plow through it when you have no other alternatives, right? And so as a remote only or an officeless company, as MarsBased, we really wanted to talk about this. As a matter of fact, I want to extend my gratitude to everybody who showed up and stood up for the challenge of speaking about this in these episodes. I remember publishing a tweet about who wants to discuss this in a podcast episode. About like 20 people messaged me like, I want to be part of this. We had to carefully cherry pick and select the people that could be part of this. We didn't really want to record an episode with 20 people, would have been completely chaotic, but definitely we'll be talking to more people about this certain issue, because I don't think it's spoken about sufficiently, and I think more people can bring different points of view, different perspectives, so we'll be recording more content about this. And before wrapping this up and jumping into the episode, I want to let you know that we are recording an Ask Me Anything kind of Q&A episode with our CTO, Chavi. So if you got questions about technology, about Ruby on Rails, JavaScript, Ionic versus React Native, hybrid mobile development versus native, frameworks, state-of-the-art libraries, architecture, developing remotely, graphical interfaces for developers, continuous integration, and all of that kind of geeky stuff, let me know. Send me an email, alex@marsbased.com or ola@marsbased.com, or DM us on Twitter or Instagram, whatever other social network you prefer, and we'll be happy to include your question in our episode. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode and on the hoops. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Nikki. Welcome to Live on Mars. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me.
I am great. Happy that it's Thursday already.
Yeah, but Sarah, you're not showing what you're having. You're having a martini, so you're probably the guest with the fanciest drink we've had so far in 2.5 years of Life on Mars. So congratulations for that. We shall do an awards section sometime in the future, and we've got the people with most cats. We've got the most random background, because there was this one of the AWS guys was running around Web Summit while taking the call, so that was pretty random. And you're having the fanciest string. So anyways, let's just jump straight into the topic, because we have received a lot of requests from our audience to talk about developer solitude, right? Or remote work solitude in general, because I think it applies to pretty much everybody, especially after the pandemic. So maybe we wanted to break the ice by saying how did you fare throughout the pandemic working remotely when it was forced to stay the fuck home? So who wants to start with this?
Let's start.
Yeah.
I had already had experience working remotely before the pandemic, because I worked 2 years for a consultancy in Switzerland from Barcelona. So I had all the problems that everyone had during COVID in the very beginning, but even more difficult because no one could experience them with me. Like bad internet connection, got to run to a coffee shop back in the day where, this is before COVID, where I could run to a coffee shop and fix my internet to connect back to a call, etc. So I had that experience already beforehand. So when COVID hit, I was kind of like, great, got my setup, already got the computer and the desk, don't have to book anything from IKEA or from, trying to get some new equipment into the house. So that was nice. But it was different type of remote working because you can't escape your house. So it's like, there's two different worlds for me.
Yeah, good point, because I think most people who suffer from this, like the isolation, the solitude throughout the pandemic, is because they had never had the chance of doing remote work before. So they were unprepared, untrained, and unequipped, right? They didn't have the good internet connection. They didn't have an office at the place or a desk, or they were not isolated from partners / children / grandparents / cats, dogs, whatever, right? So having had a previous experience with remote, I think it really helped. How about you, Sara?
I did have experience with remote work because in Barcelona, when I was working with Jordi at Learning, we had total flexibility when it came to that. And I tend to prefer working from home and having my own, I don't know, the fact that you can do laundry while you're working and like cook at home and like eat at home and like you save money, like it's good, you have your rhythm. You don't have to carry your laptop around. Like, I really enjoyed that. The better thing about working from home, where everyone had to work from home, is that at least, because when I moved to Berlin, the startup where I was working at the time, the CEO was like obsessed with everyone going to the office. And it was like, it's not necessary. Like, you're not more productive just because you come to the office. But it is true that if you didn't go, you missed out on a lot of things. And then when everyone had to work from home, suddenly documentation became a thing and all those things. So it became better. Obviously, like the distress of COVID was for other reasons, but not for working from home, like at least in my case.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point. I wanted to go into this a little bit later, but the first and second class citizens, right? When it always happens when some organizations enable remote work as a perk, but they are so office centric. You always have the first class citizens, which is everybody who gets to stay in the office. And even though they connect with the remote workers in the call, whenever the call is over, they just chat, directly at the door of the meeting room.
It's not working after every meeting, and you're not there.
You're not there. You miss out on the important things that gets discussed later, right? And so, and then maybe they even forget to invite you for the team meetings or the beers afterwards, right? However, one of the byproducts, and you also mentioned that, of the pandemic is that more documentation. So I wanted to get your opinions on this. So do you think that companies who were reluctant to go remote first are now more able to do the hybrid system because, again, they have invested in documentation for a start, and maybe Zoom, training the people how to conduct meetings, training the people not to forget or to ignore the remote workers, and maybe have more flexibility with scheduling calls and whatnot? Who wants to go with this one? Ms. Sara, since you brought it up.
Yeah, I think that it depends really on the culture of the company and how much they're really embracing the new way of working, or if they're just waiting for COVID to be over so they can get back to normal. I feel that there is a huge problem of hybrid work. It's like if no one's working at the office, because literally no one by law can leave the house, you have to document. The moment that you have both things happening, that's when you start to lose some documentation. And like in general, I mean, I'm a documentation freak. I love documenting, but that is not common. So like, nope. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. And I'm like, not exactly. I mean, you should always document. It doesn't. So it really depends on what is being like, how much they see the importance of documentation.
I feel you, because documentation, it's kind of like that thing that you like the idea of doing it. Every company loves the idea of, let's document all the things. The reality is like, that's too much time. We've got so many urgent things. I don't know, Nikki, if you got any take on this as well, because in terms of documentation, whether it's for technical or non-technical companies, I think everybody profits from at least having basic, let's call it Pareto principle, right? Like 20% of the effort, you get 80% done. You don't need to document all the things. But
yeah, I mean, I think that definitely it's improved with the remote working, but it's not to that level quite yet. And I think the biggest benefit it's had, for example, for our company, we have most people in one location and we have a few people in other parts of the world. So having the people here have to document has really benefited those who have been realistically, they're on site, but they're remote because they're part of our team, if that makes sense. So I think I've definitely seen an improvement in documentation or processes, having more things written down. But actually, I felt like that happened right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm almost thinking to myself now, man, some of the processes we have are due for a refresh probably now, 2 years on. And probably we haven't considered to do that because we start slowly going back to the office. So it's interesting.
So have you seen like the company have reverted their policies on documentation and whatnot, or is that something that you have any of you experienced?
Changing the processes, I don't think I've seen. It's more just having it on paper digitally.
Yeah. One of the things that really fucks me off about this whole documentation thing is that the companies have had to wait until a pandemic has, taken over the entire world to start doing something that is extremely necessary, right? I'm also a proponent of documentation, but I know that to a certain extent it's useful. Beyond a certain extent, it just requires too much time to maintain it, have somebody kind of like trim it and nurture it to become something useful, because it becomes outdated very, very easily, right? And I know we've got the handbook of MarsBased is public, and it's my job, and sometimes I forget, for 6 months it gets outdated really quickly. But the thing is, it really took a pandemic for companies to implement this kind of policies. But before the pandemic, most companies were doing remote work, but they didn't know it, because big companies, they had departments in other countries, in other time zones. So in a way, you were working with people remotely, but they didn't want to accept it, right? So I don't know how the fuck could they function without. When I was working at Deloitte and I was working with, multi-department projects, multi-country projects, I don't know how we function without even basic and the simplest documentation. But then again, this is my my rant for this. But let's talk more about the psychological effect of the maybe the main topic of the conversation, which is going to be the remote workers' solitude, right? We have a feeling, or at least in MarsBased, we have identified that people start suffering it from, say, 18 months, 12 to 18 months, 1 year, 1 year and a half. And then they start feeling something, it's eating them up from the inside. When did you start feeling it? Have you ever felt it? And how did you battle it? What have got to, what are your measures to work against it?
In my case, it was more than solitude in itself. It was a sense of physical distance creates psychological distance, right? So just before the pandemic, there was like this sense of camaraderie among colleagues. Like we spent every day together. We kind of became friends, like the startup vibes of Friday and we stay for pizza, whatever it is. So like you become friends, and then that also makes you communicate better with them when you need to ask them for something, or like, I don't know, there's more. It's not like you're a terrible colleague if you don't see the other person, but it's true that you don't empathize so much. Like there's a distance, and that was a bit. That it was more like the solitude, or like the so many new people joining the company that you never even met in person. A disconnect. There was like some level of disconnect with the product, the vision, the mission. Like, what is the point of this even? Like it's after some time. And I think that it started to hit the second lockdown, because in Berlin that was very, very shitty. It was winter. So it's like seasonal depression, plus not seeing your colleagues, plus why am I being asked to like do this for investors? I don't care about them. Like, I don't know, like it was just a mix of things.
Must have been around November 2020, the second lockdown in Berlin, if I remember correctly. Because I was there.
Brutal. It was pretty brutal. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, totally. We met one day, I think. Yeah.
Because we escaped, there was talks of a second lockdown in Barcelona in October. I was like, oh, then I don't want another lockdown in Barcelona. I'll fly to Berlin with a friend to kind of like live it together. And we arrived to Berlin. I said, oh, fine, everything's open here. So let's sign the Airbnb for like 2 months. And then the second week, then
everything closed. Yeah. No, it was brutal. It was insane.
But we lived it through together. And I think, Nikki, you brought it up earlier, spending it with someone else, at least it was not that, even though that the remote worker's solitude can be something that you can experience even if you live with somebody else, right? In the context of a pandemic, maybe, having somebody in your own apartment, whether it's your partner or not, or just a friend, you're just two remote workers. I think it helps to kind of like go through these situations. So what was your experience with this solitude, remote worker solitude?
I mean, I agree with the points of Sarah before about this maybe this lack of empathy and this disconnect. Yeah. I definitely experienced that. And also I agree with the timing. It's about like 18 months to 2 years. And I have the perspective of I'm leading a team, and I had a lot of new people join during this time. And I really struggle with how can I bring these people together so that they understand the vision we're going towards and that they feel connected to each other and ideally don't leave to another company. It's always in the back of my mind. So that was one struggle. And then the idea of this solitude, even though you do pass remote working maybe with a partner at home, it's a different type of solitude, maybe because you can't talk about every little thing that maybe you would with a colleague if you were just seeing in passing, like, oh, this has really bothered me today, this really small thing, because it also grates over time on your family at home or your partner at home, because they're your partner and you want to talk about other things. And if you're always talking about work, that changes the dynamic of that relationship, I think, as well.
Yeah, and that's totally true. And the other thing is maybe the fact that we had to spend. So one thing is I'm a remote worker by choice. And then you probably experience less solitude, maybe a little bit later. But when you're a remote worker by force, because there's a force majeure, right? Then maybe some of the things pile up, like people who are not, they live in a really small home. They're not equipped. Maybe they have some drama in their homes because, children, they couldn't go to school and whatnot. Maybe they're not getting along that well with their partner, or they don't get along very well with their flatmates and whatnot. These things pile up and they can speed up the process of developing this kind of remote worker solitude / anxiety, call it what you will. So the difference between living with somebody and not, I don't know. I think it just helps to kind of like make it easier. Sorry, go ahead.
Pros and cons. And I also wanted to say that, it's like when you're a remote worker by choice, you can still, I'm going to go on a trip and I'm going to work from there. I'm going to work from a cafe today. I'm going to go to my parents and we couldn't do that. You couldn't fly. You couldn't go to a cafe. So it was not like remote work. It was, you're not a digital nomad or anything. No, you're just like, you're home. And like,
you're a prisoner.
You're a prisoner. Yeah. And you're still thankful because there's so many people who lost their jobs and everything.
Correct.
But like, it's like, I'm lucky that I still have my job and like everything's good. But like in the end, you can't do anything. You can't change your office. Your office is your room. If you're lucky, it's an office within your house, and that's it. And the weekend comes and you're still there.
Yeah, I always say that if remote work is not a lifestyle, then it's not really a perk. Let me explain this. So if your company has no office, but you're forced to work from home or from a co-working space, then it's not remote work. The remote work is the ability or the possibility to say, like, today I work from home, tomorrow I work from a fucking WeWork, and the day after tomorrow I leave for Berlin and I work from a couple of cafeterias, right? That's remote work in my understanding. But the other thing is, like, you Nikki, you touched briefly upon this, and I really wanted to elaborate how important or how helpful has been for you to have somebody who understands remote work, or if your partner didn't understand it, like, because one of the difficulties I have had is like with my partner that she doesn't understand remote work. She doesn't understand that a company has got no office. And so that the barriers of when your work starts, when it ends, fluid schedules and whatnot, are very complicated for people to grasp, and that creates and erodes a relationship as well, or it can potentially do it. So how important is for your partner to understand the kind of work that you do and the implications of remote work?
Yeah, I think it's definitely key to understand that sometimes you have to be having late calls or early calls. It's difficult sometimes to put the line. I myself, I'm trying to work on that. I mean, a little bit every day to try and set boundaries, do some things for mental health, go on a walk every now and then to leave the house, you know, the typical stuff. But if they didn't understand and they come home, you know, I can't imagine how that could work, because you need to have somehow a little vent maybe at the end of the day, or how was your day? And if they've already had that, or if they've had the commute home and they've had that chance to have a kind of compartmentalization of, I'm leaving work, I'm going to home, and I haven't had that, you know, that's the problem, I think, is that we don't have that disconnect.
Well, is there any tips that you apply yourself that you would recommend to other people? So like, you know, like the small walks, is there anything else so tangible that we can share with other people?
Let me see. Yeah, I think the walks is important, but what I'm trying to do as well is more async work. Okay. Again, it's leading a team. So sometimes I think to myself, I want to call and tell people what's going on, but we have blocked our Fridays as focus days, even though we're all online and working. So we really don't have any meetings on that day. So sometimes if I think to myself, I really wish I could ask this person something, I might just film a little, you know, screen recording or something, and they can watch it on the Monday morning when they come in, and I won't lose my train of thought of where I might pick up the, you know, Teams call and give them a quick call. So that's maybe another thing that people could try and do more async work potentially. And I think that also depends on the person. Some people hate it. I think some people really appreciate it.
Sarah suggested the martini. She was waving the martini at us. I don't know if you really wanted to suggest that people should start drinking while working from home.
Not at all. I'm joking. I don't know. I mean, I know tips and tricks, but like,
yeah, go ahead.
Whatever works for you. For me, what really works is to listen, intuitive working schedule.
Okay.
I might not be the brightest cookie in the mornings. So obviously I'm going to start working like very calmly from bed. Or like I know that it's against all the playbooks, but it's what works for me. Okay.
But
so
we like that. We like that. Yeah.
Emails. And then probably after lunch, like there's a moment at 5 p.m. where I'm like, I don't even understand what I'm looking at. So I stop for like a couple of hours, and sometimes I will do my 2 hours, and then I can be with my partner, or I can even meet a friend and go out. And then when I come back, I feel more relaxed, and then I do my last hour.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
Sometimes it's 1 hour and sometimes it's 5, because suddenly I'm so focused again.
Hopefully not after 5 martinis though, but yeah.
No, not even after.
But you get a concentration spike, right? In the evenings. Yeah. Okay, that's important.
And also, it's like, I work 40 hours a week, which is like, sure. But in the end, I work in weeks. So if one day I'm not so productive, I know myself, and I know that I work on a project basis, and like my deadlines are going to be met. I hate the word deadline. I prefer target date. But it's like, I know that my target date is going to be met. And like, maybe today I'm not feeling it. It's totally fine. And that way I can really make the most of this remote work situation. Like I feel some ownership over my time.
I like the idea of taking the break, then finishing it off, because I myself, I've always been a night owl, and it's great because I don't get calls. I don't get distractions. Like, when I used to live alone, or when I was single, it was easier for me to compaginate these kind of things and do like, you know, I can work from 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. It's like, boom, I'm super creative. I've had the best ideas then. But with living with another person, then it maybe doesn't really work out. So this is one of the things that you have to adapt and kind of like set straight, like, hey, my working schedules are this, and I know I will have to sacrifice this hour of creativity, right? So in terms of like, there's another thing that Sarah, you brought up a little bit earlier, which is these small micro tasks around the house. And I totally loved them at the beginning. When I started working remotely, I was like, yeah, I can do the laundry now, or I've got this idea for the guitar. I can compose a song now for 5 minutes, do it, come back. And with the years, I have eliminated them because they tended to accumulate so much that they shifted my end time until way past 8 p.m. because it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. this, and then I cook, and then whatever. And then it's like, okay, now I need to take 2 extra hours of work because I did all of these micro tasks. So my rule of thumb, and I want to know yours, after 4 or 5 years, I stopped doing this. And I said, okay, look, would I be doing this in a regular office? If not, I'm not doing it. And if I can postpone that for after work, I will do it after work. Even though if maybe I need this micro break, I think it's better to kind of like push it through and maybe do it a little bit later when I finish my work. I don't know. What's your tips and tricks there, Sarah? I think Sarah left just for a minute. So Nikki, maybe you want to take on this.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, for me, I agree. In the beginning, I wanted to do all these tasks.
Yeah.
And then now I see them as what they are. They're tasks. They're not breaks. So they're not micro breaks. Good. They're effort. And I did the same with lunch. In the beginning, we used to cook with my partner. We'd cook some elaborate meal. It's so nice. We have the kitchen. We can cook everything fresh. And I have to say, sometimes we do it, but most of the time we now order online. We have a meal plan, comes to the house, a stack of meals, and we have this microwavable meals. And that just means that when we have the lunch break, it's really a break because it's just quick zap, and then we can eat and actually enjoy and have a break rather than cook, eat, clean, go back to work. And there's not really had chance for a break. So
yeah, it's not that healthy to be ordering every day, right? So maybe this is also one of the cons of remote working, that maybe you tend to order more delivery food, which is goes against your health. Or I don't know how you're feeling about that.
No, luckily for me, it's the healthy meals. It's like the prepackaged, good for you meals.
Okay, because you probably are more disciplined. You're more disciplined than me. If I order, then I order fucking greasy food. It's like always quesadillas and tacos and pizza. I'm not ordering a fucking
That's how
salad.
I feel though, because if I ever do go to the office, everyone has these beautiful meals they've prepared, and I'm there with an instant meal, but it's a relatively healthy instant meal.
Okay, Sarah, how about you? How do you go about this micro task? And is that something that have changed over the years, or you still keep them?
I actually have become I stress clean. So sometimes I feel like if I've had a very loaded meeting, actually cleaning the kitchen brings me back. So it's kind of meditative. Like there's a point where I was like, oh, I'll do laundry. And like that moment, it's not like my brain is completely off. Maybe I'm thinking about how to get going the rest of the day. It's not microtasking, it's multitasking. It's like, oh, well, I think about this. I can be hanging the clothes because it's something so repetitive that you don't need to be thinking about it. And it's a bit like ADHD brain of, if you're talking to me, I'm going to be scribbling. Well, if I'm thinking, I'm going to be hanging things. I'm going to be hanging the clothes. I don't know.
I actually love that it's so different, because I love what you said before as well, Sarah, about having intuitive working. What works for one person doesn't work for somebody else. And it's so annoying when you watch those videos of people, this is the perfect day, wake up at 5 a.m., do an amazing smoothie, go for a jog. Everyone's way of working is different. And it's interesting actually to hear different styles, because for me, cleaning would be creating stress, not helping me reduce it.
No, but for me, like for instance, that's a good point. Like sometimes I use this kind of task for meeting, like because we have grown accustomed to this certain tendency of lazy meetings, whereby people like, if you use calendar, people schedule you all the time. Sometimes they're fucking useless meetings, and sometimes you got to take them. Like by norm, I never take them. I don't do meetings that are not meaningful or not prepared. But sometimes it's like, okay, this person, I got to do it, or because it's a favor or whatever, right? But I will tell them, look, I take too many meetings. I will not be having my camera on. I will be just walking around doing stuff around the home. Is that okay with you? Because I'm sorry, I'm right at the limit. I cannot take any more calls, and so I let them know, right? And then I use these kind of meetings to kind of like, I don't know, I even just walk for a small walk in the balcony, which is like 10 steps one direction, 10 steps in the other. But I really don't want to sit through an endless amount of meetings, because that burns me out. That gives you eye stress, and that it's a lot. It will compound over time. It will create other kind of mental issues, right? So how about meetings specifically? Have you got any kind of tips for people how to deal with excessive amount of meetings, excessively long meetings, or useless meetings, culture of toxic meetings? I don't know. Who wants to go first?
I hate meeting. I mean, I don't hate meetings. It's like my calendar is non-stop. I mean, I'm a product manager, which is like basically juggling and with balls around on fire. And it's like, where do I get to be productive if more than 50% of my schedule is meetings? Now it has improved, and we've tried to create a culture of pure meetings, because like in the end, it's like, I'm not even paying attention. Like there's a point where I'm like, camera off, lying on the sofa like a slug.
Yeah.
And hoping that no one calls me, like it's like, if they ask me a question, I'm gonna be like, sorry, connection broke for a minute.
Yeah.
So I do like the thing of, and that's something that we didn't have in my previous job, and I really like that we have it now, is this culture of, we're expected to be, I mean, we're working, right? So if you're on Teams and you're available, then someone can call you and you can have a very quick call that could have been a message, but in the end, like, you see each other, you ask each other the question, and you can solve it on the spot. Sometimes that becomes a 30, when it's longer than 10 minutes and I'm like, this is a meeting, schedule it, because I'm focused on something else. But if it's something quick, I like the fact that we keep that kind of shared room space situation. But yeah, meetings, I zone out, but I zoned out in person as well. Like, so.
No, but you're right. Like, kind of like, I've got the idea that regular meetings or meetings occur frequently and by design, because you've got the weeklies and the dailies and the product team meeting and then engineering team meeting and whatnot. They end up meetings that you use them just because they are there. And oh shit, we got to fill this meeting up because we have already booked the people and the people are already here. Let's think of something. They're much more improvised. They're not thought through. They're not substantial. And more often than not, they require more people than necessary, therefore wasting resources and time and mental space, right? And so that's why one of the reasons why we have adopted async first in MarsBased is because by not having meetings by design, we are more available and more fresh and much more ready to have productive discussions, because as you said, like you see somebody who's online, hey, can I ping you for a minute? Yeah, boom, you talk, 3 minutes, done, right? It's much more effective. Nikki, how do you feel about that? Oh, yeah.
Purpose for the call directly.
Yeah, much more powerful. Yeah, and it's one-to-one. It's not 7 people, of whom 3 of them are just listening and probably zoning out while doing some other stuff, which is, it's not productive to them. And no, it's not their problem. They have been called into the meeting, right? It's much more of a management problem. Anyways, Nikki.
Yeah, I think that's similar for us. A little bit more async. We have our focus days. I totally resonate with what you say about sometimes you get these meetings that are the weekly team meetings that it's like, there's no topic. It's like, why are we here? If there's nothing updates, to share, right? Just we don't need to be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but status updates for me, it depends. Status updates can probably be communicated in other ways.
Correct.
Maybe just a Teams message. If it's, can fit a paragraph, I think it's fine. My personal pet peeve, honestly, for the meetings lately is that, there's 2. That somehow people stopped putting agendas and purposes to calls because they don't see each other. So they feel it's important to involve more people. And if you could see the purpose, you would know you're not needed in this meeting. And the second one is because you don't have to move physically from room to room, people always put the meetings the full hour and you never have a chance to go use the bathroom. I swear sometimes they have notes. To leave the meeting. You got to go do what you got to do, It's just crazy.
And they run over the expected time. And then you're like, okay, now I've got some actions I got to do here, but you will forget because you jump immediately to the next call, context switching very abruptly. That stresses your brain. And then you're like, oh, and then you end up forgetting about the immediate actions from the first meeting, right? So
the other thing I think is also in the past, we used to take a lot more meeting minutes. And I suddenly realized, talking about this, we stopped doing that a lot. And we started doing instead, we'll record the meeting and you can watch it on replay. No one needs to watch the replay of a meeting. They just need a quick summary.
No one watches them. No one watches that shit. Luckily enough, there are a couple of products in the market that do the TLDR for this, right? And they do kind of like a written recap or digest of the video meetings, which I think it's going to be super useful. But who the fuck watches a 1 hour long meeting of a video of a meeting that you have already been in, right? It's like, that's really fucking stupid. How big is the companies that you're working for? Because one thing that I've seen throughout the years that different kind of company sizes entail different kind of mental issues or remote worker difficulties. So how big is your company, Nikki? And let's start with you.
Ours is about 1,500 people.
Okay. Sarah, how big is the company you're working for?
15, but that's me. I joined a startup when it's seed stage. It goes to Series A or Series B, and I'm like, too big for me. My job here is done, and I go somewhere.
Yeah, I think
but this is also why you have the flexibility to do things, and we have all these processes and the usual things that come with a big company.
I like to be. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm also in an executive position. I really like to kind of be able to shape the culture of the company when it comes to these things, and kind of like talk about mental health in the workplace, take into account neurodivergence, that not everyone is the same way. And when it comes to meetings, that's something that I was like very adamant about it. Like, we can't have meetings in a row. There needs to be at least 10 minutes between meetings. Otherwise, we're going to like end up saying like, I need 5 minutes. I'm going to be late because I need to go to the toilet, or I need to, like, I don't know, smoke a cigarette, whatever it is. Like, I need to make another cup of coffee, or I will just like die on my desk. So like that did work. And also Asana, like I was like, hey guys, let's write follow-up actions here on Asana and make sure that we know who needs to do what by when. If a meeting doesn't have follow-up actions, I don't think it's a good meeting, or I don't think it was useful.
This is a great example because we, in our team, use Asana, but we're a big company, and I'm trying to get the whole company to use this tool. But as much as I would love to change the culture of meetings and things like this, if it can't be done top down, it's impossible, because as much as I can change my team, everyone who interacts with us does it their own way.
You're in a bubble.
Yeah, one of the things, it's a really good point, Sarah, when you mentioned the breaks between meetings, right? I personally, I use Calendly. I used to use HubSpot Calendar, which was essentially the same kind of tool. And they're good for certain things, but they come with other derived problems, right? That they're good because you can actually select, I don't want to have two meetings stacked up. I want at least 30 minutes, 15 minutes between meetings. There's another good thing. You can limit the number of meetings that you can have in a day. So people cannot book you for more than 3. I have selected no more than 2 meetings a day. And that's it. 2 meetings a day, at least 1 hour between meetings, because I want to work on stuff. I want to prepare the meeting. I want to do the follow-up things and all that stuff. And also I'm trying to I have reduced significantly. I used to have 8 meetings per day back in the day, but then I do sales. For me, it's normal. And now I do 3. So I think my mental health has improved consistently. But there's one thing that's really bad about these kind of tools, which is people are so used to finding the reschedule and the reschedule meeting button. So, you're prepared to go into the meeting when that's like the meeting fucking disappeared from your calendar, because people are very, very volatile and flaky nowadays, because it's like,
we all have 1,000 meetings, and then we're like, oh my God, I regret this. And then it's like, we're all burning out and we just don't talk about it. We're all equally sick of it. Oh my God, 10 meetings. And then why do we all have them? We're always rescheduling. The minute someone reschedules on me, I'm like, yes.
Oh no, I hate it. Okay, yeah.
I love it.
I love it when they cancel. But if they reschedule, it's like they put it to the next day, which is like, oh no, I wanted to have this block for this time slot for, I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to.
Yeah, but if someone reschedules on me, then I'm like, sorry, tomorrow doesn't work for me. Let's find another time that works for you.
But Calendly says that otherwise. It says that you're available. So that's the problem. It's like, oh, I wanted to do it today, get it over with. No, tomorrow. And sometimes they reschedule 5 times in a row. That's like, it's so easy for people to reschedule, and it creates a whole different kind of problem, which is like, you're dragging over this meeting for 5 days. It just happened to me last week. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Like you're still a bit sore about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm always projecting. It's kind of like when I ask questions, sometimes I embed the answer specifically into the question. But one of the things that we recorded this very same episode for the Spanish version of the podcast last week, and the reason I brought up the company size is because people in big companies tend to feel isolated a little bit more. So maybe, Nikki, this one's for you, because we had this guy who used to work for us, Fran, worked for us for almost 5 years at MarsBased. And then he joined GitLab, which is kind of like, playing the Champions League of development. And we're like, hats off, motherfucker. If you leave MarsBased to go to GitLab, we've done an excellent job at training you. The point being that he said that even though the company is 1,000 times bigger, he never felt so alone in his life working as a remote developer. Why? Because they meet once a year. They've got a retreat for 1 week, all paid, like, resort and everything. But it's once a year. Then even though they have these perks, you got budgets to fly over and meet your team, meet colleagues and all that stuff, like once a term, once a month. It's like you end up not doing it because it's like, what's the point? It feels very forced and you don't really know the people. So did you experience from your past experiences working remotely to this one that looks significantly larger, that you are more alone right now than in previous companies?
Definitely, because the one before COVID was just 30 people in that company. So it was a lot easier. You knew everyone, even though it's remote, when you met them, you really knew them. And now with so many people, it's really difficult to, probably take advantage, I guess, of the perks of being in a big company. You mentioned the financial benefits, like being able to fly and maybe see someone for a week. But like other things that you think attract people to big companies, like mentorship, for example. Oh, wow, I get to work in a big company. That means I'll have a pool of people to learn from. Well, maybe that's one of the key things that you might miss, because they're not really going to pick up the phone and do so many trainings with you. So you lose a little bit that's probably one element. I'm trying to think if there's other benefits that you probably think are associated with a large company that maybe aren't as beneficial during remote working.
No, but one of the things that perhaps that, and I'm going to open up here because I think it's a good exercise for everybody. But one of the problems I experienced in like mental health during the pandemic is that we're so used to having instant gratification on social media that when you don't get it at work, it fucking sucks. It looks like as a CEO, sometimes I feel like, oh, my messages go unanswered or they go unliked. Right? And do they really read them? And I start feeling this imposter syndrome of like, maybe I'm not the right CEO. And I kind of like, I collapsed. I had a little bit of a breakdown there. And I opened up about it with the team. I even wrote them, an internal memo. And I was like, I'm feeling this. I don't know, that's something general maybe. And the reaction was amazing. Actually, I thought like, no one would read it, or the reaction was like, oh no, we're all feeling like this. We're feeling so overwhelmed. Sorry if I haven't replied, but, or sorry if I don't react to this comment or whatever. But I think everybody started opening up and they shared their stories as well. So look, I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling burnout. The other one was depressed because he lost his grandparents during the pandemic. The other one. And then we started opening up. And maybe because we created this safe environment, or I created this safe environment by opening up, the rest of the company felt better. But I think that you can achieve that only in small companies. So, Sara, since you have got more experience with early stage companies, how do you feel about this? And do you have any similar experiences? Or
I feel that it really depends. Like the pandemic hit me in Berlin, and the company that I was working at was business coaching, and it was very focused on mental health in the workplace. There were a lot of psychologists in the team. So obviously we really cared about creating psychological safety, and everyone was very open. That is something that at that stage was easier to achieve. I feel like as you grow, then things dilute a bit more. But like back then when that happened, we really cared to like let everyone share what's going on in their lives, because it's like you don't know that. You might see someone being a bit, I don't know, grumpy one day, and you might think that it's about you, because we all are a bit self-centered. Even if we're not, it's like we think, oh, maybe I said something wrong and that's why they're snappy. And then if you have this space of like, no, my dad is sick, or I don't know, I was broken up with, I'm going through a breakup, whatever it is. And if you have that space where you can say it and it's not, there's no reaction towards it, then it's a lot easier to continue opening up. Like, I mean, as I said, I was leading a team, and for me, it was very important to make them feel safe to say, even like, I can't work today, this happened, like I'm going through this emotionally or something. It's like, I think that me giving them that space, or me giving that freedom or that wiggle room, make them more productive in the end, because they don't want to lose that. Like, they don't want to break that trust. They don't want to, yeah. So I think it really depends. And like, when the product is literally mental health in the workplace, obviously it was a lot better.
Top down, of course. It has to trickle down from management and leadership, right? And this sort of vulnerability, I think it's proven to me like it's been super useful in leading the team. Whereas 15 years ago, it was seen as fragility. And it was something that you didn't want to show, you didn't want to open up to the team, because then it was like, oh, he's not the right person. He's not super strong. He's not solid. He's like, oh, he might have other problems if he's talking about this, right? And nowadays, you want to have this empathy with the team. But I understand that in bigger companies, and that's why I also brought up the company size thing. It's in bigger companies, you've got so many people that you have never met, that you don't know, that you don't really want to share your personal stuff with. And what's more, they have higher employee attrition. Therefore, you're like, why should I get to know all these people when I know that by the end of the year, 30% are gone? And I know that people are like, these companies very transient, and people come here for 6 months on average and they fuck off. And so why should I befriend them when I know that they're going to leave? Whereas in smaller companies, maybe you get to gel a little bit better. It's like everybody stays for 5 years into the company. Nikki, you've experienced both sides of the coin. So
yeah, I guess this is maybe a Swiss thing, though. People stay here really long in companies. Like, it's strange for them to consider that people move after a couple of years. Remember when I was new to the company and I was introducing myself, everyone else was like, yeah, I've been here for 20, 30 years. It's like, I have been a year, 8 months, here, normal kind of different career path, I guess. So I have a slightly different experience of, it's still worth getting to know people in our company, because maybe they're not in that particular role, but they're likely to stay in the company for some years. But I think that might be more of a cultural thing, because if I was working in an American company of this size, I find it hard to believe, that would be the case.
Why? Is that something related to culture across borders? Or because like the Swiss don't seem particularly like people who like to open up about feelings and stuff. Having lived in Germany, there's cultural similarities, and they are not super open about things.
I think that's probably accurate, because we even had a case of burnout in the team, and there's been plenty of opportunities to open up, discuss, and even since that person is back, it's hard to get a pulse on how is it going, how can we support, and I think that maybe that's just again a cultural thing. I mean, burnout obviously is across borders, but the way people express it and the warning signs are different. So.
Sarah, you also live abroad, or having worked for companies from different countries. Any other things that you want to consider regarding, mental health and solitude, depending on the cultural differences of the companies?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I feel that the main difference that I have experienced working for Spanish, even if it was tech startups or something, and Berlin started, first of all, the salary. Let's go into that. It's easier to stay sane, and like, I mean, of course, money is not everything, but motivation is higher when you're making a good money. And but also, I feel that as a woman, I felt more safe. Not safe. Obviously, I'm safe in Spain as well, but like I felt more listened to, more heard. And even like the traits that come with being a woman are more appreciated. Like the fact that in my current job, the CEO is a woman, and the executive team, it's literally 50-50 men, women. Okay. So like that obviously is going to shape a culture that is more diverse and like more inclusive and more empathetic, because not only it's like white people of both genders, we also have people of color. So like obviously it's a very diverse environment, and those are the main difference that I felt. between Spain and Germany. And I feel that like also the feeling of when it comes to remote work, like in Spain, there's a lot of like calentar la silla, like you're just like warming
presentialism, presentialism.
You're warming up your seat, and like then it's like this person is not working. Like I see him on Tinder. What is he doing? You know, it's like then in Germany, there's not so much that feeling of you have to warm up the chair. Like in the end, it's like, oh, did you get this done? It doesn't matter how long it took you. It doesn't matter what you're doing now. And that was also better.
I was discussing this on another podcast this morning, so it's very funny that you bring this up. I used to live in Germany, and when I worked there, the boss came at 5 p.m. He said, like, everybody get out of the office. We're going for beer, which is it's okay as a practice, but the motivation is because if people stay in the office, they got to pay for the overtime, right? And so they didn't want to pay for the overtime because it's mandatory by law. Whereas in Spain, they will require you to do overtime. They will never pay it, and that's why it's created this culture of presentialism. And I remember explicitly that, as you mentioned, if you get your job done in 30 hours, why should you stay the other 10 hours of your work week? And I remember my colleagues being at my previous company, I think everybody's fucking screen, and they were on Amazon, they were on Alibaba or AliExpress, or Pinterest or YouTube. I'm like, motherfuckers, I'm working here, and I finished my work before time. So as a result, as a compensation, I got more work. So at the beginning, you kind of like do it because of sheer collaboration and companion. You think like, okay, this is good for the group. I will work a little bit more. But then it's like, no, these people are more intelligent than me, and they know that they will get this extra work if they finish before time. That's why they don't do it. And so if they don't do it, I don't do it.
There's an issue also with managers, and like I think it's generational. I feel like it's managers of this, like if they see someone until 8 p.m, that person is the one that needs to get a promotion. Like they deserve it. And it's like, correct. I finished at 6 because I actually finished at 4, and I couldn't leave at 4 because then it would be frowned upon. So I stayed like right up to the time, and then I left because why would I stay longer, right? And like there is a lot of that. It's like, oh, the person that stays the latest in the office is the person who deserves the promotion, is the person who's working the hardest. And it's like, no, if anything, quite the opposite, like and I think like remote work has helped in that aspect because now no one has to warm up the seat. It's all about results. Like it's
warm up the seat, no, but you always have those people moving the mouse. Just to make
because
sure,
they want to see active.
That it shows active. Green.
The green dots, right?
Yeah. So I don't fully agree that the remote working's made it go away. I do agree that there's benefits that have come for sure. But I still see people that could be ticking off more tasks, in Asana and just moving the mouse, maybe.
I've heard many tales of people like, my company requires me to be active at all times. And even if like somebody from fucking India or US message me at midnight, I get an answer within an expected time frame, which is because on the one hand, presentialism that Sarah was talking about, that's something that has been perpetuated by male CEOs and male bosses, because up until the 90s, only male people work at the office because only one person in the couple was expected to work while the other one was keeping the housework, right? I know it's not like that, but both persons in the couple, they didn't have to work, or they were not required to work because only one salary could sustain a family, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas past the 90s, fast forward, it's like, inflation, the prices go up and everything is like, now all of the sudden, both people have to work at the office and have to stretch their hours, which is not compatible with picking up the children or dropping the children at school, doing the groceries, going to the fucking bank during the bank hours, which is like they close at 4 p.m., 2 p.m. And it's like, okay, I get out of work at 8. Yeah, how the fuck am I going to go to the bank, right? So, and now they have perpetuated this and moved over to the digital version of it, which is like green dot, always active, reply within 15 minutes in reasonable times. But their reasonable times is maybe when boss starts, right? So I hear you.
I mean, I have it's like the Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson has the little woodbird.
Yes.
Like consistently. And like I it's also a friend of mine, she works at DHL, and like sometimes we'll be like co-working and she's like, oh fuck this, I can't do this now. And then every 2 minutes she's like that on the trackpad.
No.
So like the screen doesn't go off. And I'm like, oh my God, this is such an effort. Like no one controls what I'm doing, or like they know that it's gonna get done. So like no one's tracking when I'm online or I'm offline. Like this, and that is the culture that needs to be built. It's like it needs to be on trust. You have to join a company and you have 100% trust. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been hired. And then if you fuck it up, well, we'll revisit your freedom, a bit.
Yeah. Any parting words regarding remote work? Something that you wanted to express or share with the audience before we wrap this up? Anything that you feel like it's important we have left out regarding the solitude, or because otherwise I'm going to go into the last question, which is
just parting words. Take care of yourself, people. Make sure you make time for your mental health working from home.
Plus one. Yeah. So last question for both of you is you get to share one fuck up regarding remote work that you have to own up to this fuck up, something that we can learn from. And any story is like, oh yeah, I really fucked it up here by doing remote work.
My boyfriend farted so loud next to me during a meeting that I was having.
Oh.
And it was very uncomfortable. I don't think people realized what it was. So my reaction was even worse than like reality. Like it was like, but I heard it was so loud and it was next to me, like, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I screamed, I'm so sorry. And they're like, what the fuck? What happened? And like some people laughed, some people heard it. Like
because they thought it was you.
Of course. Like they didn't see him. He was just like next to me at the desk, and it was like this long, loud fart. And I was like, terrified.
But did he know that you were in a meeting, or did it on purpose?
Yeah, he did it on purpose. He thought I was muted.
Oh, what a nice guy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a lovely man. No, it was like he thought I was muted. It was more as a joke, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, sorry.
Oh my God. Nikki, do you have any sort of like fuck up you want to share with the with the audience? Hopefully not so scatological.
I also have problems with the partner, basically. My usual office, it's a very strange setup where I have like a window into my kitchen. So I usually have the blur effect on.
Yeah.
And apparently this has happened repeatedly, to the point that my team now calls that there's a random shirtless man that goes around my house, because luckily they don't see the bottom half. but he comes in, and when a person is on the screen, the blur effect kind of goes. So we're constantly apparently seeing him, and it was like a running joke that there's a shirtless man walking.
It's kind of like
now I found it out. I told him he can't do it anymore.
It's kind of like the naked man in Friends, right? That's like the naked neighbor. Yeah.
Luckily, they don't see nothing apart from the top half.
That's what they say.
No, I mean, for sure they don't see anything else. There's a wall.
Right. Let's wrap it up here. It's been super interesting. Thank you so much for kind of like opening up and sharing your experiences and your tips, because this is a topic that we should be addressing more often, talking in public about it more often. And so it's been super valuable to have you both on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you in the next episode, everybody.